Well, let's talk about BRICS, now 10 countries. What do the new members bring to the core original bloc?
Well, if you start looking at the membership, there's a very strong bias towards Middle Eastern countries. There was an attempt to balance that. Obviously, Ethiopia is an African country, and Argentina. Argentina has opted out. That means that it's, as I said before, it's heavily dominated by countries in the Middle East, oil exporters in particular. Very important because a lot of these countries are rebalancing their trade investment across other areas. It's not just Europe and the United States anymore. They're really looking outwards towards more regional issues.
Right, before we saw a lot of South-South cooperation. Expansion has been on the table for years. It's been discussed. What was China's role and hope in helping grow this BRICS group?
Well, you have to keep in mind that the way that China approaches things and the United States approach things are very, very different. The U.S. would say it's a U.S.-led, new development initiative or framework or whatever. From the Chinese perspective, it's always about just kind of being a moderator, being a entity there that says, look, what are the group ideas and how do we reach consensus? And that's very, very important because this is a consensus group. Nobody has a veto. It's not like the UN. And this is really about global development for those, especially those countries which feel that they're not necessarily always represented very well by the WTO, which is on the wane, and other groups that are dominated by, the Western developed powers.
With these new members, what do you think they hope to gain from being a part of this group, leaning on and turning to China, India, Brazil, Russia, for example?
Well, I mean, each one has a different agenda, and that's what's interesting about this. There's no ideological thread that goes through all these. You have very, very, very different governance, different economic size, but they're all dedicated to this idea that they're sovereign nations, that they have the right to develop, they have the right to peace and security. So although peace and security are not part of the official agenda, the subtext is that by having greater opportunities offered to countries, especially within this grouping, that it'll be easier to maintain peace and security. So as they go forward, this is a group that is going to be focused on what they agree on, which is this development and trade, not what they disagree on, which is ideology.
Einar, about a minute left. Looking ahead, 2024 here, they'll meet for the first time as this new larger group. What would you say are their priorities? I know when it comes to economics, there's been discussion in the past about some sort of common currency exchange. What do you think will be in focus on for 2024?
Well, it's always going to be about development. That's what unites this group. It's trade. Obviously, currency is an issue. Last year, 20% of all energy trades were done in currencies outside the U.S. dollar. There's some concern about the growing U.S. debt. They're trying to have some way of dealing with that, but that all goes back to trade and development. Each of these countries is trying to find a way in which you can have a new grouping, especially since, as I said, the WTO has been hamstrung because the U.S. refuses to allow any appellate judges to be appointed, and therefore there could be no final ruling. So, yes, currency is a big issue. Obviously, a huge breakthrough this week. China and Russia were able to create a secure entanglement link. That means that it has no physical transmission. It's done through this very spooky thing called entanglement, but it means that you can have an absolutely secure way of transacting business. And this is one of the main issues in terms of infrastructure versus the current SWIFT system, which is dominated by the U.S.
All right, always great to see you, Einar Tangen. Thank you so much for joining us from Beijing.
Thank you, Lynn. Happy New Year.